Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. So a few weeks ago, I posted a video listing out every romance book I've ever read. The list was short and pathetic, except for a few standout gems. But all in all, it's no wonder that I have never clicked with the romance genre just based on the books that I have read. I think every romance reader would look at my list and agree that I have not been reading from the cream of the crop. So I decided that I should give the cream of the crop a try. I went through a few years worth of Goodreads Choice Awards, jotting down the authors that show up time and time again. And the list of romance books that I have read is so sparse that it was insanely easy to pick out authors that I have never read from before, but I know are extremely popular and talked about on BookTube. It was so easy that I actually had to shorten the list to just include 4 authors in this video. The 4 authors that I picked out for this video are Emily Henry, Ali Hazelwood, Christina Lauren, and Abby Jimenez. Those are authors that I hear people talk about all the time, and no, I have never read a single book from any of them up until this video. I'm going into this video and into these books with the best of intentions. I really want to have a fun, silly time. Alright, so it is time for the first update of the vlog. We're going to start with Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. This was the only book in my library that didn't have any kind of weight, so I was able to get it as an ebook. As you can tell, I did get another book pretty quickly, so a little spoiler for what book I'm going to be reading next, but for now, Check and Mate. I'm about 50% of the way through, but before I start talking about what's been going on in the book, I'm going to give a quick summary. Check and Mate is about Mallory, a former chess player who was really good at the game up until she swore chess off in her early teens because it somehow destroyed her entire family. Her mom is too chronically ill to work, her dad's not in the picture, and so Mal has taken on the weight of supporting her entire family onto her shoulders. One day, she is convinced to play a charity chess tournament just one last time, and for some reason she ends up playing a match against the current world champion, Nolan. And not only does she play this match against Nolan, she ends up winning too. And now Mallory's been drawn back into the world of chess because she needs those cash prizes, and Nolan's been chasing after her because he really wants to play another match against her. From here until the final review of the book, this is going to be a bunch of spoilers. I'm going to recap what happens in the book and kind of give you all of the thoughts that I was having as I was going through it. So if you don't want to hear any of that, just skip to the next chapter in the timestamps, and that will take you straight to my final non-spoiler review of Check and Mate. For those of you who have stuck around, let's get into what happened in the first half of the book. I will be looking down at my iPad quite a lot because I wrote a bunch of notes trying to keep track of everything and recap everything that happened. So our main girl, Mallory, freshly graduated from high school. She's 18 years old, and this is the very first surprise that I had about this book. I was under the impression that Ali Hazelwood's books mostly follow people who are like postgraduate age, like late 20s or something. I think I mentioned in the very last video that I posted before this one that one of my preferences for romance books is that I don't really like super spicy or like needlessly spicy scenes that are just there to titillate the reader rather than further the story. I saw the ages here, and I am tentatively hopeful that their ages mean any sex will be toned down or will actually be necessary and significant for the character development, but that's me getting ahead of myself a little bit. Mallory's just graduated. She's decided not to go to college and instead stay home to work in an auto body shop. We learn a few things early on. 1, Mallory's mom has severe enough rheumatoid arthritis that she isn't able to work consistently. 2, her dad is not in the picture. I was under the impression that he had left at some point and was maybe dead after, I don't know, but he's not in the picture. And 3, Mallory has 2 younger sisters, one of them 14, I think, and the second one is 12 years old. So they're young, they're minors, and Mallory is the only legal adult in her household who is actually capable of working. Her family is experiencing financial hardships, and so Mallory is really doing her best to handle the finances in such a way that none of them, especially her sisters, have to worry about it. She is exhausted, and she's going through a lot of emotional turmoil at this point because her best friend is also going off to college, and she's really worried that they're going to drift apart and that she's going to be stuck in a dead-end life where all she does is work at this auto body shop. I was immediately endeared to Mallory. I think she is so deserving of happiness, as is everybody else, of course, but Mallory especially is giving up so much of herself at such a young age that I think she is deserving of happiness and deserving of a romance if that's what she wants. And of course, she's deserving of just a better situation than what she's in. As mentioned, Mal was a talented chess player when she was younger, which was encouraged by her father. She did a bunch of tournaments, she had the potential to go pro, but then at 14, something happened to make her swear off chess. With all of that information, our main love interest isn't even introduced, and I was hooked. I think Ali Hazelwood made a really good choice to start off with several other things that would keep me invested in Mal and in the story while she is then trying to build up the romance. Our story really kicks off when Mal's best friend Easton convinces her to participate in this charity tournament. Mal reluctantly agrees with the idea that she's gonna throw whatever match she's in, get it out of the way. For some reason, her first match is against world champion chess player Nolan. While they're doing this match, there comes a moment where Mal realizes that she can see a way of getting out of the trap that Nolan has laid for her and winning the match as well. And she can't help herself. She does exactly that. She wins the match, and then she panics and she runs away. Unfortunately for her, someone does film the match happening and it kind of goes viral on TikTok. And the next day, a lady named Daphne shows up at her door. Daphne runs a chess club and she has an offer for Mallory. For the first year, their chess club is offering a fellowship to one promising young player. In exchange for a 1-year salary, all Mal has to do is get some mentorship, participate in some tournaments, and just play on behalf of the chess club. Solid deal, and it should come to nobody's surprise that Mal turns the offer down. Normally, this is where I'd be criticizing characters for just being stupid and stubborn for no good reason, but I will concede that Mal has a good reason here, because the fellowship is only promised for a year and she would rather stay at her job and have a more stable income. Sucks for her though, she loses her job the next day, so fellowship it is. Mal lies to her family about this though, and she tells her family that she's working at a senior center because somehow, some way, chess ruined her family's lives and it would cause a whole lot of hurt for them if they knew she was playing again, which I'm absolutely certain is just a dramatic 18-year-old perception of events. I'll be shocked if this book doesn't end up with Mal's mom finding out that she's playing chess and then being super supportive and like saying like, oh, you could have played chess this whole time. I would have always supported you. I never wanted you to have to stop. But for right now, Mal is studying techniques and past games and playing matches against Daphne. We've also got another member in the chess club, Oz, who's like a very prickly grandmaster. Soon after, the three of them go to the Philly Open where Mal competes. She does really well on the first day, and that night she goes to a party for the players who are continuing the tournament with Oz. And now here is where we get the sexism that is prevalent in any male-dominated field, which I would have criticized this book for if it never acknowledged. But have no fear, Ali Hazelwood took the time to include a douchebag chess player with a superiority complex and the audacity to call Mal honey and ask if she was wearing a low-cut top when she won against Nolan. His name's Koch, he sucks, and I appreciate a common enemy because it does turn out that Mal and Nolan hate him with like equal vigor. After the party, Mal comes across the hotel pool, and in what really feels like an unnecessary and out of place scene, she ends up stripping down to her underwear, jumping into the pool. Of course, because this is a romance, Nolan is the one who comes across her. They don't even talk though. Mal runs away immediately, and at this point, Mal is convinced that Nolan hates her because he keeps intensely staring at her. And for anyone who's familiar with the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation or its TV adaptation, The Untamed, for a split second, this kind of reminded me of Lang Wangji. If you know, you know. The next day, Mal advances up to the semifinals. She's up against Koch, and she manages to trick him into a draw that allows her to advance to the finals and play against Nolan. Or she would, except Nolan is a very sore loser and kicks up a fuss saying that she violated some dumb rule that gets her disqualified. Nolan's very on her side, and he would have refused to play against Koch if it didn't mean that that guy would have won, and honestly, screw him. So Nolan plays the match, he wins the match, and he wins $50,000. As a semifinalist, Mal wins $10,000. And this is apparently the moment where she realizes that chess players win cash prizes and can make bank off of them as well. Which is kind of just past the point of belief, honestly, because if Mal was obsessed enough with chess when she was younger to be looking up the greats at the time and studying their games and their play styles, how does she not know that chess players make money? She can't stop thinking about the game even though she's trying to convince herself that she's going to stop playing again once her fellowship is over. And Nolan straight up can't stop thinking about her because he shows up at her house one day and manages to get himself invited over for dinner with her family. There were things to love about this dinner scene, such as them touching knees under the table, which I think is the first real touch of the book, but there's also things that are kind of odd about the scene because we get this strange conversation of every member of Mal's family basically asking Nolan if they're sleeping together. You can be open about those topics, but I don't believe that you're so impolite that you would start asking things like that at the dinner table. At a minimum, wait for the after dinner dessert, right? During this night though, we get some other information. We find out that Nolan played a match against Mal's dad at least once, and based on her reaction to that, her dad definitely did something bad. It's not that he just died. We know that Nolan hasn't seen his parents for years because they have some kind of disagreement over his chess career, and we find out that Nolan is so desperate to play against Mal again that he's willing to give her his entire $50,000 cash prize. Mal turns him down, which I think is just an example of some poor financial choices on her behalf, because if somebody offered me $50,000 to play a game that I don't really like, but all I have to do is play one match, I'm going to play the one match and I'm going to take the money, especially if my family is in a bad financial situation. But she's 18, her brain hasn't fully developed. And that must also be the reason why she's confused as to why he wants to play against her so bad. He explicitly said that his career was starting to feel monotonous and he had considered quitting up until he met Mal and he felt reinvigorated. Like, was she not paying attention to that conversation at all? Beyond that, Mal's youngest sister, Darcy, finds out that she's been playing chess again because there was an article about the match, and Darcy agrees to keep it secret. Mal gets the opportunity to go to the Chess Olympics in Toronto, which I have no idea if that's an actual thing, but I hope that it is, because I like the imagery of a chess Olympics. Mal is the 4th member of the US team alongside Nolan and 2 of Nolan's close friends, Emil and Tanu, whom I love, by the way, some of my favorite side characters in the whole book. It is implied that the only reason Nolan even went to this tournament is for the chance to see Mal again. Very sweet. At the Chess Olympics, Mal plays against another asshole who kicks up a fuss about her supposedly cheating. They call over an official to settle the dispute. Mal recognizes this official. The implication is that Mal's dad had an affair with this woman. How is this Mal's fault? I'm really not sure, but she sure feels a lot of guilt for it. That night, all the young chess players do exactly what you would expect any rowdy group of youngsters to do. They throw a party. At some point, Mal and Nolan are left alone, and Nolan again expresses a very strong desire to be able to play against Mal again. Mal refuses, but we do get a little bit of internal insight on why she's refusing, because she has this realization that she's afraid that if she plays against Nolan and loses, all of the fascination that Nolan has for her will just disappear, because then she won't be special anymore. We have a really sweet moment here where Nolan proposes instead playing a game of tic-tac-toe instead. He respects the fact that she doesn't want to play chess, but he still wants to play a game against her. Tic-tac-toe, winner gets to ask questions. I think the only new information we get is that Nolan is a virgin, which is completely reasonable and makes sense for somebody who's only 20 years old. Oh, and we also learned that Mal is, borderline idiotic and somehow still doesn't realize that Nolan is super into her. And that is where we left off. Of course, throughout all of these events that I've been mentioning, Mal has been thinking about Nolan and about how attractive he is and how mad she is that she finds him attractive, all of that stuff. It does get cringe, especially when she talks about like the fantasies that she's been having about him. And in most romances, this would put me off, because I'll be sitting there hearing these characters talk about how they're like so desperate and horny for these people and they can't help thinking about their love interests. And all I can do and think to myself is, girl, you're 34. Have some dignity, have some self-restraint. It's not that hard. But this kind of cringe behavior is so much easier to let slide when the main character is 18 years old. I am liking the book so far. This doesn't like change my brain chemistry good or anything like that, but it's entertaining and I'm enjoying the experience. There are a couple things that annoy me, mainly just how oblivious Mal is, especially in respects to how Nolan feels about her. It's practically explicitly said by more than one person, I think, that Nolan has feelings for her, and yet somehow she continues to be confused and say things like, "What do you want from me?" Or "I just don't understand," or like, "Why do you want to play a match against me so bad?" And I'm like, pay attention and listen to his words. But it's not so bad that I'm not having fun, and I am very much rooting for them. Nolan gives such simp energy, which I find so adorable. He's like 2 seconds away from getting on his knees and begging for the honor of playing one chess match with her. I think they're very sweet together. They make chess feel like such an intimate thing between the two of them, and I find it interesting that they're not just developing feelings for each other as people, but they're developing feelings for each other as chess players. Like, you can see the way that Mal talks about Nolan's play style, that her interest in him is furthered because of the way he plays, and that she's not only attracted to him, but she's attracted to his chess playing. I also really like our cast of side characters, which is really important for me in a romance. Although I will say the tension between Mal and her sister Sabrina, crazy. I think Sabrina is being cruel and very unfairly blaming Mal for whatever happened with their dad. And I get that Sabrina is 14 years old, and like really any 14-year-old is a terror that must be weathered, but still it goes so far. I feel so bad for Mal. I did finish Check and Mate. I flew through the other half of the book literally the day after I filmed the first half update. After their TikTok game, there's some tension between Mal and Nolan because Nolan stepped on some nerves. And then Vanity Fair does an article featuring a picture that Mal didn't realize was taken of that night. And in the article, Koch calls Mal Nolan's girlfriend. Mal freaks out immediately and she wants to reach out to Nolan because she's convinced that Nolan will want to set the record straight just like she does, which absolutely he would not. I don't know how she doesn't seem to get this yet, but Nolan seems like the kind of guy who would be so proud for people to think that he is dating Mal. So no, I don't think he would set this record straight. Mal shows up at Nolan's door out of the blue after finding his address on the internet. Nolan opens the door sick as hell. This man is running a high fever. And it leads to one of the funnier parts of this book, in my opinion, where Nolan basically reveals that he's been dreaming about Mal because he thinks that her showing up at his door is another dream, and he starts rambling on and says, "You should come to bed. This is a stupid setup. I like it much better when we," at which point Mal cuts him off. To Nolan's great sadness, I'm sure Mal does not jump into his bed, but she does make him chicken soup. And I think it's such a key thing to point out how much they take care of each other. I don't think I mentioned it in the first half recap. In Toronto, Mal falls asleep on the couch at one point and she wakes up the next morning, tucked in, glass of water on the bedside table. Nolan clearly took her to bed. I really appreciate how they seem to be developing kind of an equal partnership. We also get more of Nolan's backstory. We learned that his grandfather, who taught him chess, had dementia and almost got him killed at one point, and Nolan's father was constantly telling him, up until they stopped talking to each other, that Nolan was going to go down the same path as his grandfather unless he gave up chess. After that conversation, they end up asleep on the couch cuddling each other up until Mal gets a call and finds out that she's been selected to participate in the Challengers tournament, which determines who will have the chance to challenge Nolan for his world champion title. There's some media fuss about this, with some people speculating that she was only chosen because she's a woman, and the professional chess world have been under fire for a lack of representation. Other people are speculating that she was only chosen because she's Nolan's girlfriend and Nolan had exerted some kind of influence to get her into the tournament to begin with. Mal gets into her head about it and she ends up having a conversation with Daphne, who tells her about the sexism that she had experienced throughout her chess career and how it destroyed her own self-confidence for a while. The only reason Daphne isn't my favorite side character is just because the competition in this book is pretty stiff. But I'm so grateful that Allie Hazelwood took the time to show not only a genuine female relationship, but genuine female mentorship. Emil and Tano show up to join Mal's team, which will help train her and prepare for the tournament. A dream team, actually, especially when hints are dropped that Nolan has been passing along information and potential strategies to them to share with her. It strongly reminds me of that phone call scene in the show Queen's Gambit, which is one of my absolute favorite scenes of the whole show. The camaraderie, just beautiful and touching to see.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, Harry. It's really nice to hear your voice.
Oh, hang on.
Hey, we're so proud of you.
Mal keeps winning until the tournament ends with a match between her and, of course, that douchebag Koch, who apparently is universally hated by the chess world. Right before the match, however, she gets a call from her mom who says she loves her and that she's always proud of her. And at this moment, I knew, in my heart of hearts, that Mal's mom already knew that she had been playing chess. The match with Koch is going well, so well, that Mal is convinced she's going to win and finally play against Nolan. And she's having this whole revelation, which is kind of romantic, about how she really wants to be Nolan's adversary and play against him and have him think she's incredible for her chess skills. Unfortunately, Koch plays a move that's impossible to get around and she loses. It's a move that's so good, everyone's just confounded. They're like, how did Koch pull out that move? He's never been that good of a chess player. I knew immediately this must mean that he cheated. Nolan is slotted to play against Koch for the championship. Nolan asks Mal to be on his training team, and we get this exchange that I think summarizes why I love their romance so much. Mal is saying that if she agrees, she'll end up knowing his strategy like the back of her hand, and Nolan just smiles and says, "You think I don't want you to know me?" My comment at that point just says, screams into the abyss. This is the kind of intimacy I love in romances, okay? The intimacy of knowing each other and wanting to be known by the other person. Anyway, the whole team retreats up to a house in upstate New York. Mal regularly goes home, but things are tense with her sister Sabrina, who keeps lashing out. It's becoming more clear that the problem here is more so that Mal keeps acting like her parent, and Sabrina seems to want her to just act like her sister. Mal's an oblivious character though, so she doesn't quite seem to get that. We finally get some full lore though. Mal's Mal's dad did cheat. Mal was the one to see it and the one to tell her mom, who then kicked out Mal's dad from the house, rightfully so. And then a few years later, a year prior to the events of this book, Mal's dad was drunk driving and he ended up dying in an accident. Mal thinks this is all her fault, by the way, and that she shouldn't have told her mom, which is ridiculous. It's around here where I actually start getting annoyed with Mal, because I understand that she has trauma. But I still think 18 is entirely old enough to understand that cheating is bad and people deserve to know the truth of what's going on behind their back. The lore on Nolan's side is that Nolan's grandfather was institutionalized after an incident where he forgot who Nolan was, thought he was a threat, and ended up stabbing him. The reason that Nolan feels at fault here is because his dad used that as an excuse to institutionalize his grandfather, and unfortunately, Nolan's grandfather did die in the institution. The conversation between them ends badly because Nolan is trying really hard to get Mal to understand that it's not her fault, and that pisses her off. In response, Mal angrily starts a chess game with Nolan, essentially because she just wants to give him what he's been asking for this whole time so that he can get off her back, get out of her life. The thought process had a lot of leaps, I think. But regardless, the match goes badly. Mal's too angry and upset, and Nolan finally calls it off, saying that he doesn't want to play with her like this. He wants to play against her at the World Championship as he thinks it should be. They finally kiss that night, but it doesn't go further than that and them literally sleeping together. Nolan takes this as an invitation to be, well, bold and do shit like sitting with Mal practically in his lap and biting her earlobe. Whatever you like, man, I don't know. On another night, Mal goes to Nolan's room and finds out that he not only kept the tic-tac-toe sheet, but he's been traveling with it. He took it from Toronto to another tournament he had to go to back home, to this upstate New York house where they're training, all because the tic-tac-toe sheet makes him think of her. Super romantic in my opinion, and Mal clearly agrees because they end up kissing again and then not. So literally sleeping together. This is a fade to black sex scene, which I think was perfect. We got enough of the beginning of the event to get a feel for how they work together. I thought the book handled Nolan being a virgin really realistically, with Mal checking in with him to make sure that he's comfortable and Nolan feeling understandably nervous and unsure, but still enthusiastic. And they clearly have a playful but sincere approach to it, which I thought was really cute and really sweet to see. And after this, they are so happy together, which is also at the point where I remembered that third act conflicts and breakups are a staple of the romance book format. I was already upset. Nolan then asked Mal to go to Italy with him as support during World Championships, which turns out to be an unnecessary invitation, because this is when we find out that, yeah, Hotch did cheat, and because of that, Mal is going to play against Nolan instead. I absolutely love that Nolan does not see this as a betrayal, because she's been training with him, so she knows all of his strategies from like an insider perspective, but instead of that, Nolan is ecstatic. I think it's really important to note that he doesn't even say that he's happy to play against her. He says that he's happy to play with her. Unfortunately, Koch, just ruins everything. He does this TikTok video where he reveals that Mal's fellowship has been funded by Nolan. Mal feels manipulated and lied to. They get into this big fight where Nolan accuses her of settling and using her family as an excuse to do nothing with her life and her chess skills, and where Mal calls him selfish and manipulative and says that his whole family doesn't love him. Straight up, I'm on Nolan's side. He had good intentions all the way through. Although, yeah, of course, he should have told her and he should have asked what she wanted. But the thing is that everything he said felt less like an attack of her and more like him trying to get through to her, whereas everything Mal said felt like it was just intentionally said to hurt him. And just to note, this is where Nolan tells Mal that he loves her for the first time, which good on you for communicating, but you should have known that this wasn't going to go well. Mal storms off, has contact with everyone from the chess world, and goes home determined to stop playing chess again. She's refusing to participate in the World Championship, where the prize money is $3 million. Are you hearing me? $3 million. Do you know how many zeros that is? I found that so annoying. How can she claim to put her family and their financial needs first and then refuse to play this tournament where the potential prize is $3 million? Never talk to Nolan again. What? Who cares? I don't care. But $3 million? All she's talked about this whole book is needing money for her family. Her refusing this for even a second, it's actually so stupid. Oz clearly agrees with me because he takes the time to go to her home and rip her a new one, saying she's selfish and telling her that her refusal reflects badly on Daphne and their chess club, which might even get unaccredited because of Mal's refusal. Mal's angry and upset, and she goes back inside to see her family criticizing her cooking, so she snaps. Not undeserved, but she goes pretty far in cursing at her family and saying that they're ungrateful. She does regret it immediately, and she starts crying and running to her room. Her mom comes into the room, and this starts a string of heart-to-heart conversations. Her mom knew about the chess playing. Mal's sister didn't keep the secret secret for a second. And it's exactly like I thought. Mal's mom is super supportive and she never blamed Mal for a second with everything that happened with her dad. Apparently her dad already cheated before and already had substance abuse issues, so there's a chance that everything would have ended up exactly the same, even if Mal hadn't said anything to her. Sabrina finally apologizes for being a brat and does explain that she misses having Mal as her sister. All four of them, Mal, her mom, and her two sisters, have a really touching moment. They have a whole group hug. It's very sweet. I actually teared up during the conversation she was having with her family. It was just so loving and kind and like all of the support that Mal had needed and had been missing throughout the rest of the book. The whole family ends up going to Italy for the World Championships. Mal spends days nonstop training. This is a lot of pressure, you know, she's the first woman to make it to the World Championships and she feels like she has to represent all of them. Luckily, her best friend Easton shows up. During this whole book, Mal has mentioned time and time again about how Easton hasn't been answering her texts and how they're drifting apart and how sad she is about all of that. Well, Sabrina took it upon herself to message Easton and let her know how Mal's been feeling. And Easton flew all the way to Italy to tell her, hey, I've been feeling the same way. I thought you were getting tired of me and moving on to this cool new chess life you've got going on that you never bothered to tell me about. They work it out, they make up. Prep for the championship continues. There's a press conference where Nolan apparently doesn't even look at her once. R.I.P. He does absolutely come to her defense when some journalist makes some comment or another about how Mal doesn't deserve to be there. Mal's been working through her feelings throughout all of these heart-to-heart conversations, and she really wants to apologize to Nolan for the fight that they had, but she doesn't really know how to do it. The night before the match starts, Mal wakes up in the middle of the night and she walks over to the area where the match is going to be taking place, and lo and behold, Nolan is there. This does feel a little contrived, and also like the reconciliation is a little too easy. They both apologize and hash out what happened. Mal also finally says that, yeah, she does want to be with him. Not quite on par with him saying that he loves her, but baby steps. Nolan drops quite the sweet line though by saying that when he's with her, he wants to play more than he wants to win, which is just a whole thing considering they both hate losing. The next chapter, the last one before the epilogue, is super short and just shows that the championship is beginning and then cuts off, which I had feelings about seeing. I think it's crazy that the whole book is about Nolan desperately wanting to play a match against Mal and then we don't even get a play-by-play. That was kind of disappointing. The epilogue does reveal that Mal won the world champion title. They came to a draw many times before Mal managed to win against Nolan, and we also find out that they've been living together. I ended up giving Check and Mate 4 stars. I genuinely considered giving it 5 stars because there was a lot to love about this book and I really enjoyed reading it. I'd even like rereading it one day. But I reserve 5 stars for books that I adore so much I want to inject them into my very veins. It was a very good, solid romance. It hooked me from the beginning, and once it really got going, it was super easy to binge. It felt a little bit like if the show Queen's Gambit was a rom-com. I thought the romance was so sweet and tender. I feel like if you read the summary, you're gonna go into this expecting a rivals to lovers trope, and that's really not what this was, at least not in the traditional sense that I think people interpret it as. These are two people who are so talented and obsessively passionate about chess that instead of feeling animosity for a rival, they feel impressed and crave the chance to see how their own skills will play out against each other in a match. There's a huge amount of mutual respect and also care for each other. There are multiple instances throughout the book where you can see them trade off in taking care of and supporting each other, which is lovely to see in any good relationship, but is especially lovely when you consider how Mal is under so much pressure trying to take care of her family the whole time that she doesn't necessarily feel like there's anyone who's taking care of her. If there's any imbalance in their feelings, it's in Nolan being way more obsessed and into Mal than the vice versa, which I'm totally here for. I'm a firm believer that the guy in the relationship should be way more in love than the girl is. In one of my comments while reading, I literally called him a puppy. He's so sweet and kind of clingy at times, and he's just so sincerely and wholeheartedly interested in Mal. I think there was a good balance between romantic and platonic relationships and other real-life growth and struggles. It's so important to me that characters exist outside of their romance. This book felt like a blend between a romance and a coming-of-age story. I think Hazelwood did a really good job of showing all the complicated, tangled-up feelings that Mal had. She was going through a lot of struggles throughout this book. Some, like being her family's sole provider at such a young age, were really heavy, and it was done with an understanding of how that kind of pressure and other pressures would impact Mal's decision-making. Other struggles were just so a part of the teenage experience, such as feeling like your friends are going to drift apart after graduating from high school, or feeling like you're not doing enough with your life. And there's also the struggle of loving and hating both people and things in such equal measure that it's just easier to run away than reconcile those feelings with each other. And I love that we got to see the internal work Mal goes through to disentangle those feelings and also unlearn bad behaviors that she learned as coping mechanisms. Hazelwood just makes Mal feel like such a real person. person. Mal is so authentically a teenage girl. She's dramatic in her perception of things. She's quick to beat herself up about things, but she's also loves to gossip and bicker with her sisters. Mal being a teenager made me forgiving of things that I often really dislike in romance books and can often put me off of them. I can forgive cringy, horny thoughts. I can forgive eye-rolling miscommunication and overblown reactions because that's what teens do. I think my only real complaint about Mal is that she is oblivious not only about Nolan's feelings, but also about the chess world at large. And it is an oblivious that passes the point of belief and lands right into the territory of annoying. Her martyr tendencies, while well-earned, I understand them, are also, they're just a bit much sometimes. That and the frankly rushed and abrupt ending are the two main criticisms that I have for the book and are the reasons why, I mean, this just couldn't have been a 5 stars. But the romance and how entwined it was with Chess was genuinely romantic. We got good character development, and despite the rushed ending, all loose strings were tied up by the end. Side characters were all great. I need a good, strong cast of side characters in a contemporary novel, and this fully delivered. The dive into the chess world was interesting and it felt realistic. For those who care to know about spice levels in books before they read them, this was not spicy at all in my opinion. It was like spicy in the way that some people call regular black pepper spicy. It's a fade to black level of spice, just enough to know what you need to know about their dynamic. Anyway, our next book is A Funny Story by Emily Henry. So surprising, if you didn't notice it on the shelves. But yeah, I went to my library on a whim this past weekend, took a look around, wondering if any of the books I was planning to read would be in the library. I would expect all of their books to be checked out, and even if they aren't all checked out, what are the odds that the one that I want to read is the only one that was there? Actually, this was the only Emily Henry book that was there. So this is about Daphne, whose ex recently dumped her for his childhood best friend. And mind you, that's after Daphne uprooted her life to move to his hometown. So she's got no friends or family around, and she is now in need of a roommate. And you know who else is in need of a roommate? Yeah, that's right, the childhood best friend's ex, who was also just dumped by her. I'm gonna get into reading, and then I will come and see you again once I'm halfway through the book. As a reminder, this recap section is going to be full of spoilers. So I've told you the basic premise, but let's go into our characters. First, we have Daphne, a children's librarian, who moved to her fiance's hometown in the house that he bought, but she furnished. And then we have Peter, who is her ex-fiance, who realized that he was in love with his girl best friend on the night of his bachelor party, and then immediately went home to tell Daphne that she had to move out so that his new girlfriend can move in. Petra is the childhood best friend who felt like a bachelor party was a romantic backdrop for a confession instead of, you know, the 25 years prior that she had to do exactly that. And then we have Miles, Petra's ex, who gets broken up with in a very short note, not in person, in a note, and agrees to let Daphne move in with him. I started out tentatively liking this writing style. I like the way it set up the drama of it, the narration of the initial breakup and everything. It felt a little bit like the opening narration of like a 2000s rom-com or coming of age movie. It also occurred to me while reading this first half of Funny Story that in contemporary romance, at least, I think I like having characters who you're very obviously supposed to hate because it makes me automatically root for our main characters out of spite, if nothing else. I liked hating on Koch in the previous book. I'm reminded of The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, where the only reason I rooted for the couple was because I hated someone else more than I hated them together. And now this setup makes me want our main couple to get together and be so happy and just so in love just to rub it in Peter and Petra's faces. Those assholes really went into this breakup in the most horrible way possible. And he gives her a week to get out while he's off on like some romantic getaway with Petra. This is also after Daphne took so much time and made such an effort to ingratiate herself with Peter's friends. All of the relationships she's built up are pretty much as a couple. Not only is she losing this relationship, she's losing this house, and she's also losing all of the friends that she had been trying to make in this new environment. On the night of the breakup, after Peter has already left, Miles shows up looking for Petra, and Daphne asks to move in with him because she knows that Miles has a 2-bedroom apartment and now no second person to help pay the rent. In the beginning, Daphne and Miles aren't really interacting very much. They're just trying to be like distant roommates and stuff. Miles is in the middle of a very dramatic post-breakup like depression session, wallowing to sad music and like even sadder movies and crying and all that kind of stuff. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was really funny how pathetic he was. Daphne, on the other hand, I mean, also sad, also trying to process the breakup she just went through, but she's really focused on the readathon fundraiser that's happening at her library, and then she wants to move out of the town and get a new job elsewhere. Things change when both Miles and Daphne get invitations to Peter and Petra's Petra's wedding. And just to put this timeline into perspective, I think those two have only been together like 3 weeks at the point that the wedding invitations are sent out. And it's bonkers that they've sent their invitations to their exes. Miles and Daphne decide to go get wasted. Valid choice. They joke about RSVPing to the wedding just so they can go and ruin their wedding. However, Daphne wakes up the next morning super hungover, just barely remembering that they did in fact RSVP at the same time that she receives a call from Peter. Peter is on some nice guy asshole bullshit because he's saying that he wants to make sure that she doesn't feel pressured to go, and he knows that she must be feeling really lonely and like not have anyone to go to the wedding with, and like all of these kinds of pitying comments. Daphne just blurts out that actually she does have a boyfriend, and guess what? It's Miles. To which Peter makes a really rude comment implying that Daphne and Miles are not going to last until the wedding, which is like, I don't know, like 3 months after this invitation. We've learned that Daphne has some abandonment issues. Her mom raised her alone while her dad was kind of flouncing in and out of her life. But with Peter, she started feeling trust again. She started to feel at home again. And then, well, he did this. And apparently he's the kind of guy who like insists on seeing themselves as a nice person, a good person who wants to be well liked by everyone. Luckily for Daphne, Miles is very amused by this lie, and he's down to keep it going just to piss off Peter and Petra. A few days later, Daphne goes to the winery that Miles works at with one of her coworkers from the library, Ashley. And this is a very important moment because again, Daphne never really good at making friends. Ashley and Daphne bond over their exes. Daphne tells her about the lie with Peter. And then after he gets off of work, Miles takes Daphne to a local drive-in burger place, and then they go to a locals favored beach. You know, a couple of things that Daphne hadn't really gotten the chance to explore while she was in this town because it wasn't Peter's kind of thing. While at the beach, they open up more about their exes, their backstories. This first half has like a ton of pages, just characters chatting back and forth or Daphne narrating to us what her backstory is. And I've really summarized what you need to know about her backstory, except for the fact that it is very important to note that Daphne really truly loves her job as a children's librarian, and she really loves doing the Saturday storybook hour. It's a reading hour where Daphne picks out like a picture book or something, and she does all of the character voices that the kids find really fun. Daphne genuinely really cares, but she feels lonely and unlikable, as if everyone she gets to know and lets into her life is going to eventually abandon her. On the contrary, we learn that Miles is a very likable guy, knows a ton of people, has a lot of connections to the local community. During this conversation, Miles finds out that Daphne has every intention of getting a new job and leaving after the readathon, and Miles insists that Peter or his presence shouldn't also steal this town and the experience of living there from Daphne. So he proposes a plan to take Daphne around the local area every weekend in the hopes of making her fall in love with the town and decide to stay after the readathon. He also tells her that he does like her, presumably as a friend. He says that he likes having her around, which I think is something that Daphne probably hasn't heard a lot of. The first day of the make Daphne fall in love with the town plan turns out to be Miles taking her around to buy local produce. I'm talking like asparagus and cherries and things like that, and introducing her to the local vendors along the way. He does seem to be like a genuinely really nice person who's interested in other people, wants to get to know them. He definitely has golden retriever energy. Unfortunately, when Miles and Daphne go to a lavender farm and they're enjoying some nice lavender cookies, they cross paths with Peter, who tells Daphne that she deserves better than Miles and that Miles is a mess. Daphne gets really mad about this and she asks Miles to kiss her to put on a show for Peter, who's like watching from across the parking lot. And this is what opens the door for the physical attraction side of the book. Daphne can't stop thinking about the kiss, and we have, you know, a lot of those classic instances you think of in a romantic comedy, like, oh, I'm wearing this white shirt and it's more damp than I thought it was, so now it's like slightly transparent and oh no, you know, kind of thing. Which is crazy that we've had like similar scenes in both of the books that I have read so far. Eventually, of course, Daphne and Miles do end up making out a little bit and also doing a little bit more, but they get interrupted by Miles' sister Julia, who calls and tells him that she has impulsively decided to visit the town and is going to be crashing on his couch for a while, which would be annoying as a roommate, except Daphne and Julia do like click instantly. As a part of the weekly plans, Miles and Daphne go kayaking at sunrise. They have more conversations. Honestly, my biggest issue with the book so far is that there are so many just conversations that it feels more like a slice of life story than any real events happening. I'm skipping over so many pages of this story because I don't want to say for the millionth time that Daphne and Ashley opened up to each other more. They said more about their backstories to each other, which totally did happen. I'm very proud of Daphne because she's been been making a real effort at developing more friendships. Ashley's even invited her to a monthly poker night that she has with some of the other locals, and those friendships are also developing nicely. Like, slowly but surely, I think Daphne is starting to set roots in the community, and that's great to see. As for Miles and Daphne, though, after the makeout, they haven't really continued exploring that potential. They think it would complicate their relationship as roommates and also complicate their blooming friendship if they were to jump into something romantic with each other, especially after they just got out of, very serious long-term relationships. And I have to say that I do appreciate that Emily Henria has chosen like a totally reasonable excuse for why the couple isn't together. The fake dating isn't the most realistic thing, but this has to be like the most reasonable catalyst for a fake dating situation than most other fake dating stories I've seen. In the interest of setting some boundaries, Daphne does intend to put a little bit of distance between her and Miles. She doesn't really intend to take on his invitations for the weekly plans anymore, except she does. She takes another invitation because she had just seen, I want to say, like Instagram post of Peter and Petra. Throughout this entire first half, Daphne has mentioned kind of sporadically that she's seeing Peter and Petra's romance unfold on social media, and it makes her sad because they seem to have like a picturesque relationship, and Daphne feels like she's just been so easily replaced by someone better. So because she's feeling down, she does take the next invitation from Miles for another weekly plan, although at this point in the book, Daphne and the reader does not know what that event is. At the moment, I feel like the book is just fine. I like the characters just fine. I like the side characters. I think they're funny, and I like seeing the strengthening bonds between everyone. Miles seems so sweet, and you can tell that he's putting a lot of effort into getting to know Daphne and getting to know her preferences in life, such as the pet peeve she has for people being late all the time. It just feels like nothing's really happened though, and I feel like there's some repetitiveness with Daphne kind of rehashing the same backstory and the same issues with multiple different people. Maybe the second half will feel more substantial than this. It was not more substantial. So the event that Miles invited Daphne to turned out to be a senior prom, and by that I mean like senior citizens prom, this local fundraiser event that a lot of the local business owners attend. So Miles thought it would be a good idea for him and Daphne to go so that Daphne could work on networking with those local business owners and try to get more sponsors for her readathon event. And this scene, I think, really exemplifies the person that he is, because it turns out that Miles basically knows everyone in town, and he's really good at chatting with them. He's really good at building rapport with them and then steering the conversation towards Daphne's readathon. Daphne is able to secure a lot of sponsors. Daphne is, of course, charmed by this. It's not all great though, because it turns out that Peter and Petra are also attending this event. Miles and Daphne do their best to avoid them, but I mean, frankly, running into your ex at an event like this is kind of necessary for the plot, so of course they run into them. And Peter and Petra are just full of backhanded compliments to both Daphne and Miles. How annoying is it? You're gonna treat these people so horribly, break up with them in one of the worst ways possible, and then you're gonna try to pretend like you're such a nice person, you feel so sorry, you feel so bad about it, but like at the end of the day, you're still a good person, you're still a nice person, so they should still want to be friends with you. If you're gonna be an asshole to them, be upfront about it. Daphne takes offense at an insult to Miles, and they end up kissing in front of Peter and Petra. Then they escape to the dance floor, they dance a little bit, they kiss again, a kiss that apparently is so good that Daphne says that she's left feeling breathless and dizzy. Daphne runs away trying to get some space, and Miles chases after her asking what's wrong. Eventually Daphne tells him that she's tired of playing this fake dating game that they've got going on because it's becoming really confusing to her what he does or does not feel. Miles kisses her right away and tells her that he always wants to kiss her, it's just sometimes easier to find an excuse. I thought this was a realistically romantic confession, and it did make me smile. The mood is kind of killed though when Miles tells Daphne more about his childhood growing up with a mom who was obsessed with her image to the point that she felt like her kids were out to get her if they, in her opinion, made her look bad. Miles recounts this one incident where he got sick, but his mom refused to let him stay at home, forced him to go to school, and then at school Miles did his best to throw up very quietly in the bathroom so that he wouldn't get caught, because he knew that she would be really upset if that happened. His mom is very much described as abusive, and his dad is labeled more as an enabler who doesn't help him or his sister at all throughout their childhood. Miles is significantly older than his sister Julia, and Miles feels a lot of guilt for leaving the house once he turned 18 and, in his opinion, abandoning Julia. Daphne disagrees with this, telling him that Julia viewed the situation much differently than he did, because earlier in the book, Julia had told her all about how her brother Miles made sure to come home every single weekend to see her and whisk her away from the home for a little while. This is the point where I think we have a very clear picture of their personal issues. Miles says that he panics when things get complicated, he just shuts down and he doesn't know how to trust himself or his own feelings on situations. Daphne, on the other hand, is very self-deprecating. The abandonment of her father, the lack of long-term friends, and then now this atrocious breakup with Peter has kind of left Daphne feeling like she is not someone who is worth staying for. After this heart-to-heart and let's call it like a semi-confession, things are going pretty well between the two of them. Daphne is really happy in life. She's going out to do things with Miles and Ashley and Julia. She feels like she's really making connections in the town, and she's even starting to see a future staying there. During a girls' night, Daphne is convinced to try on her old wedding dress that she never got around to selling, but while she's putting on that dress, Julia and Ashley step out to, I think they were getting smoothies or something like that. But the point is that Miles is the one who arrives home after work to see Daphne in her wedding dress. He also helps her out of her dress afterwards because the zipper is stuck. No spicy times happening here though, although I'm sure that's what you would expect. If it's any consolation, he does give her his t-shirt to wear instead. A couple days later, Daphne finds out that Ashley's birthday is a week from then, and she convinces Ashley to hang out that day and paint a room in her house, which her ex-husband had never allowed her to do before. Before her birthday happens though, Daphne comes home to find that her dad has unexpectedly shown up with his new wife, who is truly a character. The kind of person who pays a psychic to say that she and Daphne's dad were previous lovers in a life that suspiciously matched the plotline of the Titanic movie. They're not bad people necessarily, but Daphne's dad is clearly and frustratingly oblivious to the damage he's caused. Daphne, like a lot of people with, let's say, boomerang parents, is very distrusting of his appearance, but she so badly wants to give him another chance. All of them, plus Julia, go have a boat day on the lake and then have dinner afterwards. There's an upsetting moment during the dinner though, where Daphne's dad recounts a formative memory of Daphne's childhood. Daphne's dad paints this cute story of how Daphne fell in love with libraries and how that led to her working in a library now, whereas the way Daphne remembers that memory is her finding her dad flirting with the librarian and realizing for what she calls one of the first times that she is never going to be the priority for her dad. But again, she wants to believe that her dad has changed. And there are signs that her dad is becoming more of a considerate person, but I'm sure anyone who has consumed as many stories as I have consumed, you're probably feeling the same way I'm feeling. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it did pretty soon. Daphne's dad had told her that he would show up for one of the reading hours that she holds for the kids on the weekends. But when the day arrives, Miles shows up instead alone and tells her that her dad had left a note saying that he had received a sudden invitation from some friends and that he and his wife had decided to continue on their road trip and just leave. Daphne is understandably upset, but she reacts pretty stoically. She starts rationalizing in her head that she's actually glad that her dad didn't come to the story hour because she would have been embarrassed doing all the voices in front of him. And she tells Miles to leave so that she can do reading hour alone. After work though, she apologizes to Miles for essentially kicking him out of the library. Miles takes her to his favorite beach, which is a pretty small, pretty hidden away one. They have a pretty cute moment here where they're on the shores and Miles hoists her up. They're playing in the water. They hug. It feels very safe and secure for Daphne, and then they go home. Once they're home, they end up kissing again, and this is the big moment for the girlies who want spice in their books. Although I will say, if you read a lot of spicy books, this must feel underwhelming for you. I'm personally indifferent to this scene. They end up having sex over a kitchen counter. I'm just pretty glad that Emily Henry decided to sum up the things that they were saying to each other instead of actually having like the dialogue quotes of whatever cringy dirty talk that they had. I didn't find the scene cringy or anything, but I also didn't find it particularly hot. After the afterglow has faded, they have another heart-to-heart in which Miles calls out Daphne for always discrediting him when he says that he wants her. Daphne does seem incapable of understanding that people can and do want her around because of the damage that her dad has caused. Daphne tells Miles that she feels like she's always waiting around for her dad and that she feels like she's not worth it to people, and she's scared that one day Miles is going to realize the same thing and that he's also going to leave her. Miles reassures her, tells her that he definitely thinks that she's worth it, and they have this little exchange of them saying that they want to know all parts of each other. Daphne and Miles have a lovey-dovey bubbly day, and then Daphne is back to work on Monday, at which point she realizes something pretty important, which is that Ashley's birthday was on Saturday, the same day that her dad stood her up for a reading hour, which means that consequently Daphne stood up Ashley. Ashley is mad and hurt, and she criticizes Daphne for being a we girl, which essentially means she's the kind of girl who always prioritizes her partner and doesn't really know how to exist outside of a we unit, as in we, my partner, and I kind of unit. And Ashley feels like now that Daphne has a new we to be a part of, Ashley's just getting tossed to the side. And then, karma, really, Miles ends up standing up Daphne, who's waiting for him to pick her up after work. All of his texts are super short, don't really explain why he hasn't shown up to pick her up. And then, like a sign from the heavens above, Daphne gets a call from a job that she was really interested in a place close to where her mom lives now, saying that they're interested in interviewing her. Miles doesn't go home that night, but you want to know who does show up the next day? Peter, that dick. Yep, he and Petra have broken up, which we all could have seen a mile away, and he's come crawling back to Daphne. He starts talking about how he just freaked out about the wedding, he got cold feet, and how he knew the relationship with Petra was a mistake like a week in. And then he has the audacity to say that Daphne belongs with him and that they can start their lives together again. And I want to make it clear that he's not asking Daphne if she's interested in starting their lives together again. He's just saying that they can in a way that implies that he assumed Daphne was just waiting around for him to be ready to do that again. I really have no words for like how smarmy and nice guy, meant in a derogatory way, Peter is. He did not get ripped to shreds enough in this scene, so I did find it kind of unsatisfactory, although I'm glad he and Petra broke up as expected. I was really proud of how Daphne reacted in this scene. She not only had to deal with that, but she also had to deal with another bomb that Peter dropped, which is that right after he and Petra broke up, Miles showed up to help Petra move all of her things. And Peter's convinced that Miles and Petra are getting back together. Thankfully, Daphne stands her ground and she does turn Peter down. And to Miles' credit, he does show up the very next day to apologize. To that, Daphne says that it's her fault, that she shouldn't have had expectations of him to begin with. And this does result in an exchange I love, where Daphne says that she had expected something from Miles even though she had tried not to. And Miles shoots back immediately, good, expect something. You want to put me on the hook, put me on the hook. I freaked out, Daphne, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. Not only is this the love confession, but I also appreciate that when faced with a woman who's self-deprecating and has such low standards for herself, Miles demands that she raises her standards. He demands that she holds him accountable because she deserves a man who will do better than that. To my amusement and respect, after that confession, Daphne just says no, says she has an interview for a job out of town, and then leaves to turn down both men back to back and choose to be alone instead of allowing the disrespect and hurt that she has, historically never fought against before. I think is a pivotal moment for Daphne, who, as Ashley called it, really is just accustomed to being a part of a couple unit and doesn't fully know, I think, how to exist by herself and be happy and content that way. Daphne goes home and calls her mom, who does a wonderful job of comforting her. I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but I do really love the relationship that Daphne has with her mom. And I think it's great that with all of the abandonment that Daphne has felt throughout her life, at a minimum, she has her mom, who's always been in her corner. After the call, there's a line in the book where Daphne says that she knows what she has to do now, and not gonna lie, I got really worried. I was like, you better not have turned them down just to 3 pages later, turn right back around, run back to Miles and be like, actually, I love you so much and we should be together right away, right now. I feel like I saw that line and I broke out into a cold sweat. Thankfully, Daphne does not run to Miles. Instead, she plots a way to make it up to Ashley for what she did to her. She asks her poker night friends to convince Ashley to attend an off-schedule game, and while Ashley is off at that game, Daphne breaks into her house. We're not going to go into that. And then goes to the room that they had originally planned to paint during Ashley's birthday, and she starts painting the room. Ashley returns in the middle of it, and they have a whole conversation where Daphne apologizes more fully, and Ashley explains how she felt about the whole thing. They make up, and then they transition instantly into a gossip session about everything that Ashley has missed in the meantime. And then it's readathon day, and like with any event, the day starts with some fires because some volunteers have some stomach bugs. Ashley tells Daphne not to worry about it, that she's going to find some other volunteers. Right before the event, with as horrible timing as Peter, Daphne's dad calls her to wish her luck for the event, making it very clear, however, that he doesn't actually know what this event is, even though she had told him about it. During the call, Daphne also finds out that Miles had driven all the way up to where her dad was just to chew him out and try to convince him to come back. And that is the reason why Miles hadn't come home that night after helping Petra with her things. She tells her dad straight up that he was a shitty dad and tells him how badly he messed up her childhood, and then she hangs up. After that call, we see that Ashley has scrounged up some new volunteers, which is basically all of the locals that we've been getting to know, as well as Miles and Julia, all of them there to help her. The event is, of course, a success, and afterwards, Miles and Daphne have another heart-to-heart, which I want to say is maybe the last heart-to-heart of the whole book. Miles explains that the reason he panicked after they slept together was because he woke up happier than he had ever been, and he was so worried that he wasn't capable of giving Daphne everything that she wanted and deserved. They both finally confirmed that neither of them are interested in getting back together with their exes, and and that they are, in fact, interested in each other. Another moment of pure respect for this woman, Daphne tells Miles that she has no intention of moving back in with him. She tells him that she's going to stay in town, but she is getting her own place. Love this choice for her. I think it's so important for her to be by herself without a man for once, and for them to have some distance before jumping into a super serious relationship. We do get an epilogue that happens a year later, though, where we do find out that at that point, Daphne and Miles have moved in together into this cottage that Daphne had been eyeing up throughout the whole book. And that is the end of quite a recap. So we can finally get into my final thoughts. So for all of you who skipped over the spoiler-filled recap, welcome back. Good to see you again. I don't know if what I'm about to say is a hot take, but my rating for this book is 3 stars, and in my heart, it's a very mid 3 stars. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I also don't think there's anything great about it. I'll give Emily Henry some props for managing to make 2 improbable things. 1, moving in with your ex's new girl's ex, and 2, fake dating, understandable. There wasn't really any point in the book where I was, rolling my eyes because something was so unrealistic and just contrived. The situation, while crazy, I can believe it happened in the way Emily Henry set it up. And our main characters also have very realistic interactions. I liked the way their relationship progressed because it wasn't Daphne or Miles just instantly going on and on about how attractive they find each other and how they can't stop thinking about each other. Instead, their relationship started out as strangers, solidly became friends, until certain events opened their eyes to the possibility of a romance. I also thought they had good chemistry with each other, although I wouldn't call it sparks flying, burning, passionate chemistry. I would just say they are compatible people, I think. For those who care to know about spice levels in books before you read them, there is on-page sex, but not a crazy amount and not graphically described either, in my opinion. We're told what's happening, but Emily Henry isn't pulling out a thesaurus and finding all possible adjectives to describe it either, if you know what I mean. It's pretty easy to skim through if you're uninterested. If you're a big fan of spice, however, I think you'd probably find this underwhelming. If you're someone who prefers character-driven stories, this book might be up your alley. I'm not saying that there's no plot, but there is such a large amount of conversations between characters talking about their backstories, talking about their individual issues, and talking about their relationships with each other. Another large chunk is Daphne narrating to us her backstory as well. It all started feeling really repetitive. There were moments where we got a chunk of a backstory that I was like, we just heard about this 20 pages ago, so I'm not really sure why we're just rehashing it in a different kind of way. That alone would have made the whole book 3 stars for me. It was too repetitive and for my taste, and it was too conversation heavy. While events are happening, the way they're written and described makes it feel like the events are only 30% of the book. At one point while reading Funny Story, I remember thinking to myself that it feels almost empty to me. In my head, I was comparing it to cotton candy. It's sweet, enjoyable in the moment, but it disappears almost instantly and it leaves your stomach empty. It's nice enough while you're reading it. Again, the romance is sweet. The emphasis put on building community was perhaps my favorite part of the whole book. Not only is Daphne developing friendships after so many years without having any close ones, but one of the main missions of the story is Miles bringing Daphne around town to try to convince her to stay in this town instead of moving at the end of the summer. I wouldn't call this a spoiler, by the way, because it's really just the catalyst for all the events that follow. It's just a part of the setup. Daphne making those connections as well and putting down roots is a major theme of the book. So if you like that kind of thing, if you like wholesome small town vibes, you might also like this. On the other side of the spectrum of emotions, if you like tense, difficult relationships with parents, this might also be an option for you. All in all, it was good enough that I would give Emily Henry another try, but I found it just okay and slightly boring enough that if I were to give Emily Henry another try, it's just because I don't have anything else to read. And now it's on to the next book, which I don't have in person, so I'm not going to put anything up right here. The next book I'm going to read is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. And honestly, I don't have it in me to write a new synopsis for this one, so I'm just going to read out the Goodreads summary. Dr. Brianna Ortiz's life is seriously flatlining. Her divorce is just about finalized, her brother's running out of time to find a kidney donor, and that promotion she wants, oh, that's probably going to the new man doctor who's already registering 80-7 on Brianna's pain in my ass scale. But just when all systems are set to hate, Dr. Jacob Maddox completely flips the game by sending Brianna a letter. And it's a really good letter, like the kind that proves that Jacob isn't actually Satan. Worse, he might be this fantastically funny and subversively likable guy who's terrible at first impressions, because suddenly he and Bri are exchanging letters, sharing lunch dates in her sob closet, and discussing the merits of freakishly tiny horses. But when Jacob decides to give Brianna the best gift imaginable, a kidney for her brother, she wonders just how she can resist this quietly sexy new doctor, especially when he calls in a favor she can't refuse. I'm pretty pretty sure this is another case where I haven't chosen the most popular book by an author, but if you watched my previous video about all the romances I've ever read, then you know I'm a total sucker for letters and books, so I felt like if I was gonna read an Abby Jimenez book, like it had to be this one. I honestly have the highest hopes for this one, and I'm gonna be really disappointed if it doesn't turn out good. I come to you having finished Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, like 100% I've finished it entirely. Now, why did I not come to you at the 50% mark and tell you my thoughts halfway through like I've promised with all the other books? Because I had a breakout. That's it. That's really the only reason. I had a horrible breakout on my chin and I really didn't feel like being on camera with that. And mind you, I still have a breakout on my chin, and I'm just hoping for once that my phone camera quality is not good enough to pick up details like that. But I didn't want to keep putting this off, so. But while I didn't film at the 50% mark, I did pause in my reading at that point, and I took notes so I can give you the thoughts that I had. Much like Brianna and Jacob, I got off on the wrong foot with this book. Mind you, it wasn't even my fault. It was Brianna's fault. Our story starts with Jacob's first day at the hospital where Brianna works. Every single patient that he's seen that day has died, and we're talking 6 patients. To Brianna's credit, however, she doesn't think badly of him until after having a conversation with Gibson, the current chief of emergency medicine. So Gibson is retiring soon, and Brianna is like a shoo-in to be his replacement. She's excited about this, and frankly, she needs this win for several reasons. One, her divorce is finalizing soon after her piece of shit husband cheated on her with someone who she thought was a friend. 2, the dating market out there is abysmal, and on top of that, 3, her brother is ill in end-stage renal failure and in need of a new kidney. Sadly, Gibson kicks her while she's down a bit because he tells her he's delaying his retirement in order to give the nurses and other doctors a chance to get to know Jacob better before voting on who the new chief should be. And this does suck. She didn't think there was any competition, and now all of a sudden this guy who's been there for less than 24 hours is in the running. I get it. This is horrible. Even so, I think Brianna's being like really dramatic here. Brianna makes an immediate leap here that this must be due to nepotism. She's immediately talking to her friend about how it's bullshit, about how Gibson is being sexist, etc. I just think it's rude how quickly she started talking shit about someone who, as far as we know, has been kind to her for all of the years that she's worked at this hospital. This book is dual POV, which I at first both liked and disliked because Jacob's POV instantly explains things and also at the same time makes Brianna look even worse. So we switch to Jacob's POV after his first day when he's meeting up with his brother and his brother's girlfriend, who turns out to be Jacob's ex-girlfriend of 2 years, no less. No respect for bro code, clearly. We start getting hints, even at this point, of how much Amy, his ex-girlfriend, was really a bad match for him and how much it's impacted Jacob's self-esteem, but we'll get into that later. The basic explanation is that Amy has never understood how much Jacob's diagnosed anxiety affects him. Anyway, these two apparently decided that a loud, crowded restaurant was the best place to announce to Jacob that they're getting married, and Jacob takes such a high road that I can't even see it from here, okay? He's supposedly totally chill about it. Could not be me, not even for a second. But ever since those two got together, his family has rallied behind Jacob, even disinvited them from family events, and it's clear that they're taking their cues from Jacob on how to react to the news. And frankly, Jacob is just tired of this whole situation tearing his family apart and making them feel like they need to pick a side. Jacob insists to his family that it's fine and he's moved on. This does trigger a chaotic conversation where his parents ask about his sex life and even make suggestions for which loops to use. And maybe I am a prude. I didn't think I was, but maybe I am. Maybe everyone's having conversations like this with their parents except me, because it's happened in 2 out of 3 books that I've read in this video. Anyway, Jacob lies and says that he has been seeing someone, and as he's walking out of the supply closet where he was on the phone with his family, Brianna comes running down the hall, runs into him, and breaks his phone. Does not look back for 1 second. I've never worked in a hospital, but this does seem like a safety hazard of some degree. Jacob follows after her into a patient room where Bree is caring for her younger brother, Benny. He is very flustered by how pretty Brianna is and stressed and anxious, and he does put his foot in his mouth, wrong time, wrong place, to essentially scold Brianna. However, Brianna is just plain rude for her initial response as well, because how are you not sincerely apologetic, even for 1 second, for running into someone? It's just, I was not liking her at this point. Jacob is humiliated by her sharp dismissal, and he feels so hated at his job right now. His anxiety is spiked super high. We find out here that he takes medication for his anxiety and goes to therapy. He's starting to feel like this hospital is just not a good place for his mental health, okay? He doesn't feel welcome or comfortable. He goes back to the same supply closet with the intention of hiding, but it turns out that that place is also Brianna's favorite spot to cry, which is exactly what she's doing when he walks in. Jacob panics and runs away. Thankfully, he redeems himself by coming back with a warm, wet washcloth for her to wipe her face with. They almost have a moment here, like they're making jokes. And then Jacob says maybe the worst thing ever that you could say in this situation. He says that Benny's situation could be worse because at least Benny can live for decades on dialysis. Absolutely valid reason to hate Jacob. If this had been the initial and only reason that Brianna hated him, I wouldn't have found her so annoying because that's a terrible thing to say. She snaps at him, totally justifiable, but then she ends it by mentioning the job thing and accusing Jacob of having Gibson pull strings for him. We switch back to Jacob's chapter, which truly serves the purpose of making me feel sick with pity for this poor guy. He has quite literally no idea what she's talking about with this Gibson situation. He goes out to lunch with Xander, a fellow doctor and his best friend, and also Gibson, who it turns out is friendly with Jacob's mom. And at this point, I was a little worried that it would turn out to be some kind of nepotism situation. I mean, regardless, I still thought that Brianna was coming off as petty and childish for how quickly she made that leap with no evidence, because she doesn't know anything. She has no idea that Gibson is friendly with Jacob's mom. And it's not even really that. Jacob tells Gibson he has zero interest in the position, and Gibson tells him it doesn't matter because he never thought Jacob would win over Brianna anyway. Gibson just wants to create competition for Brianna so that when she wins, it will prove to everyone and herself that she earned it. The three of them continue chit-chatting and we get more context for Jacob's actions. His ex Amy is apparently a super extroverted person that eclipsed Jacob essentially. The catalyst for their breakup is because Jacob realized he knew everything about her, but she didn't know anything about him. He says that even when he was with her, he felt lonely. We also find out that Jacob somewhat relates to Brianna's situation because his mom had needed a kidney transplant years ago. He mentions to Xander and Gibson that he'd always wanted to pay that forward, at which point we learned that he could potentially be a good donor match for Benny, who unfortunately doesn't really have any other prospects. Switch back to Brianna. She goes out to lunch with a friend/colleague whom she describes as hating everyone. So imagine her surprise when said friend immediately calls Jacob a wonderful man. Brianna brushes this off, but the universe is conspiring to prove it because when she gets to work, she sees Jacob taking the time to sew up a doll for a little girl in the ER. I was instantly annoyed with Brianna in the first chapter of this book, and I was immediately endeared by Jacob by the second chapter, but she's still not convinced. However, Brianna feels bad enough to give Jacob advice about bringing the nurses cupcakes so they warm up to him. Meanwhile, Benny is moving in with Brianna. His kidney failure came on very fast, and we later learned that Benny lost his job, his girlfriend, and most of his friends in one fell swoop because of it. At this point, he's clinically depressed. He's not taking care of himself at all. Later in the first half, Brianna even theorizes that the reason Benny had gotten an infection at the beginning of the book was because he didn't care enough to live. It's very concerning. So she insists he move in with her, and this does feel like a regression for both of them in Brianna's mind, because following the separation from her cheating husband, Brianna is now living in her childhood home by herself, and the whole house is basically frozen to what it was when she lived there as a child. That and how she generally feels about love and a potential new relationship in the future is making her feel stagnant. Brianna's father had walked out on their family when her mom was pregnant with Benny, but despite that, she had believed in love and she had trusted her ex-husband. Now she has no intentions of ever falling in love again. Frankly, the chief position was her one hope of progressing in any aspect of her life. When Brianna gets to work the next day, she finds a red velvet cupcake, her favorite flavor, and a letter from Jacob on her desk. This letter explains everything we know from Jacob's perspective, and he apologizes for everything. Brianna feels like a total asshole with this new context, as she should. Brianna writes a letter back to apologize for her actions, and at the end she makes a peace offering that already puts her leagues ahead of Jacob's ex Amy. Brianna says that she'll make sure to always invite him to after work drinks, even if she knows he won't come, and that if he does come, she will act like a buffer between him and the drunk extroverts and not even force him to make small talk. She also clearly says, "Know that you are welcome and wanted." I loved everything about that. This was a turning point for how I felt about Brianna. This exchange of notes, so important to me. Through this exchange of notes, Brianna and Jacob get to know each other a little bit and they get more comfortable, comfortable enough to make friendly jokes. Their humors are compatible. I gave a chuckle now and then. Brianna feels re-energized by the letters. It feels like she finally has something to be excited about again, which I love for her. They continue to exchange letters until they hit a 4-day weekend, and Brianna doesn't want to wait 4 whole days to get another letter. So Brianna finds Jacob on Instagram and sends him a friend request. Jacob accepts the request after a classic anxiety worry about it. Unfortunately, Jacob is at his cabin for the weekend, which has really bad internet, so the messages aren't coming through. This guy leashes up his dog and runs all the way to the restaurant down the street just so he can hop on their Wi-Fi and have enough connection to keep talking to Brianna. Amazing. And it gets better, okay? Brianna asks to call him. So they get on the phone and it's going great. Conversation is flowing naturally. They're having such a good time. And then it starts raining. And even so, Jacob stays at this restaurant for hours huddled under an umbrella outside because he has a dog with him so he can't go inside, just so he can talk to Brianna. Brianna is starting to grow on me at this point, but Jacob, I adored him from the get-go. Things are looking up for them right now. Jacob is much happier at work and he's at ease with Brianna and wants to understand her more as a person. Brianna is having fun again and she's enjoying the effort of unraveling Jacob and getting to know him. They end up meeting to have lunch in the aforementioned supply closet. Brianna intentionally invited him to eat there because she figured it would be more comfortable for him than the crowded cafeteria. They're just hanging out when someone knocks on the door and it turns out to be one of Jacob's sisters. So Jacob's sister sees them in the closet together, and I'm sure you can see the assumption that she makes and, you know, the same assumption that she shares to her entire family. Now his family is blowing up his phone about his relationship with Brianna. Later, Jacob is hanging out with Xander, who tells him to just ask Brianna to fake date him because she'll be chill about it. Jacob seems like he would rather die than do that. Fair enough. He also finds out that after a series of tests, it turns out he's a perfect match for Benny. Jacob agrees to donate his kidney under the condition that it be anonymous. He really does not want the attention or the obligation that Brianna might feel due to his donation. Brianna goes home to find that her best friend Alexis has driven down to be with her on the day of her divorce finalizing. We find out that her husband didn't just cheat for a couple of years. In hindsight, Brianna knows that he had actually been in love with the other woman during their entire 10-year relationship. While Alexis is comforting her though, Benny screams all of a sudden and they run over to find him laughing and crying. He's just been told that he has a donor. Benny comes alive immediately. He's joking and hanging out with his friends and looking forward to the future again. The next time she's at work, Brianna talks to Gibson about the donor and Gibson lets slip that the donor is Jacob because he doesn't realize it's supposed to be anonymous. I found this so funny because I thought the donation secret was going to be like the crux of the third act conflict. And instead, the secret lasted barely 12 hours. Brianna runs through the whole hospital to find Jacob and is just sobbing grateful tears. They hug. It's very sweet and also sad because Jacob seems touch-starved, frankly. While they're talking, Jacob gets more texts from his family and he ends up spilling the beans about how his family thinks he's dating Brianna. Brianna immediately agrees to help him and says she would have done it even without the kidney thing. Now here's where we get what I thought would turn out to be the actual third act conflict. Jacob explicitly says that he is not over Amy. Surely this will come back to bite him. That night, Brianna goes to a family dinner with Jacob. This is the beginning of the total chaos that is Jacob's family. I found them funny, but they definitely feel like an anxious introvert's nightmare. But Brianna is genuinely having a fun time. She does have a panicky moment when she learns that Jacob's mom is actually a relationship expert and sex therapist. This is the only acceptable reason for the sex talk that they were having earlier in the book. I want to give kudos to Brianna here also, because after her panic, really the only thing she says is that they need to up their game, okay? They need to really get into the faking. In the interest of upping their game, Jacob and Brianna are now fake dating in front of all their coworkers and friends too. They're hanging out all of the time to get to know each other better. At one point, they're hanging out at Brianna's place and they get into just how bad of a match Jacob and Amy were. Amy actually it sounded awful. It didn't even sound like she wasn't willing to accommodate Jacob's anxiety. It sounded like she was trying everything she could to trigger the anxiety. She'd text him that they needed to talk, insist on playing humiliating games in public, throw surprise birthday parties, etc. I mean, it's a lot. And Jacob is convinced he's the one that's ruining things by being himself. I adore Brianna's response to this because she is so no nonsense and to the point in saying that it's not Jacob's fault that he doesn't like that stuff, that nothing is wrong with him at all. Fast forward 3 weeks and it's time for the engagement party. Beforehand, Brianna sees Jacob's home for the first time. When she sees his bed, she does do a little fantasizing, and here she admits to herself that she does really like him, that her hard no on relationships is softening just for him, but that it's too complicated with like all of the layers of them working together, of Jacob being her brother's kidney donor. They hug, and there's a pivotal sentence where Brianna wonders if when Jacob touches her, he's actually wishing she were Amy. Very key considering the situation with her ex-husband. At this point, I could smell the third act conflict. And this is where I left off at the 50% mark, right before the actual engagement party. Leading up to the halfway mark, I was genuinely worried that I was not giving this book a fair shot. I felt like I was nitpicking things too much. Like at one point, I highlighted a moment where Bree reflects as something that reminds her of a past backpacking trip, and I found that annoying. I couldn't tell if I just found recollections like that more jarring in the way romance novels tend to do it, or if I felt like romance novels do recollections just more often in general than other genres do. My feelings were probably unreasonable. Like, do I feel like romance books so far have a ton of consistently sprinkled recollections? Yeah, but I don't know that it's any more than any other contemporary book. I don't know if you can hear my cat yelling, by the way, but if you can, it's because their lunchtime is in 40 minutes and he wants to tell me right now. The fact that I was genuinely really enjoying it by the 50% mark tells me that it was at least partially a problem on the book's part. The writing felt amateurish at times, needlessly spelling out things that I could have inferred. At one point, the book says, I felt like there was a lesson here about not judging books by their cover or something. Yes, obviously we came to that conclusion like 10 chapters before. It's the whole point of the premise. That being said, the representation of anxiety, very good in my opinion. It was so accurate to me that I at least once stopped and said to myself, wait, is that not what everyone does? Obviously everyone experiences anxiety differently, but I saw a lot of my own behavior and Jacob's behavior. I was a little on the fence about whether I felt like she was making it too much Jacob's personality and didn't give him enough personality traits outside of that, but I reserved my judgment until the end. At this point in the story, I was here for the relationship. Brianna had really redeemed herself and then proven herself to be a good match for Jacob. And it warmed my heart so much how much Brianna would consider what would make Jacob feel better in situations. The way Brianna puts it is that when they're together, often just being quiet together, it feels like they're agreeing to be harmless to each other, to let each other exist exactly as they are. This phrasing of agreeing to be harmless to each other, so lovely. And I'm not even bothered by how many times it was repeated in the book. I thought it was adorable. On to the second half, starting with Amy and Jeremiah's engagement party. This is the first time Brianna and Amy are meeting, and Amy starts with a passive-aggressive comment about how she couldn't believe it when she heard Jacob had a new girlfriend. Again, much like with Funny Story, I don't understand where people who clearly did wrong by somebody else get off on then also being an asshole to them while simultaneously insisting that they are a good, caring person. I don't get it. Thankfully, Brianna claps back and says that she also couldn't believe it when she heard what this party was for. Brianna does put her foot in her mouth a bit by expanding the lie, however, and saying she's moving in with Jacob, but that's a problem for another chapter. In this chapter, the party is going pretty well. Jacob has the conscious realization that he's really glad he and Amy broke up because they were not suited to each other at all. Jacob steps out for a bit, expecting Brianna to follow closely after, but it's Amy who steps into the room instead. Amy really wants to talk because she's worried that Brianna isn't actually interested in Jacob, just using him for his kidney. I understand the genuine concern. I feel like she should have realized that she was maybe the last person in the world who should have been bringing this up to Jacob. It totally plays on his insecurities. Jacob, in a real moment of growth, stands up for himself and even raises his voice angrily a bit. This is where Jacob gets his closure for how their relationship ends. He and Amy hug, which he describes as platonic, and he's determined to find out whether Brianna might have real feelings for him. Unbeknownst to Jacob, Brianna overheard parts of their conversation, enough for her to wrongly assume that Jacob's passionate replies, i.e. him angrily yelling, meant he was still in love with Amy. Doesn't help that Amy's lipstick was smudged on his shirt during the hug. So when Jacob drops off Brianna and works up the courage to ask her out, Brianna immediately shoots him down and says they just need to get through their arrangement. Brianna thinks that he's just upset and that she'll just be a rebound for him. I get it, but this scene was devastating. I mean, Jacob is so visibly hurt and he withdraws and he says that he's sorry for making her uncomfortable and that he'll never ask her again. They go their separate ways. Brianna runs to her friend Alexis's house in a nearby town. Jacob goes to his mom, who gives him some good advice. She tells him that love is about showing up and that he needs to keep showing up and trust that Brianna will set her boundaries. Remember how a minute ago I was saying that I wasn't sure how I felt about how much the author made anxiety a part of Jacob's life / personality? I forgave it in this part because Jacob himself acknowledges that a lot of his life has been dictated by his anxiety. He makes a conscious choice here to leave his comfort zone. Is it questionable to have it be something he can consciously control and choose to improve upon for the sake of a girl? Yeah, a little bit. Jacob starts the next morning by calling Brianna and asking if he can go to the town where she is, even though it means meeting her friends and being in an entirely new situation. Brianna says yes, and credit to her, even though she's upset, she makes sure to send Jacob a rundown of what to expect. So he shows up, they have a cheerful night out with Brianna's friends, and when they go home, they both step into Jacob's room to grab a sweater Brianna left with him. And guys, this is my first one bed trope. Wait, no, I take that back. These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong had a one bed trope, didn't it? If I'm remembering correctly, and it did, then I think this is my second one bed trope. But still, this is a pivotal moment for me. The house that they're staying in is old, and because it just rained, the door gets stuck in the frame, and Brianna is stuck in Jacob's room overnight. They just end up getting wasted and playing games. Brianna does drunkenly say that she loves him, but it's brushed off. I do want to take a moment here to say that I really appreciate that we haven't had anything really spicy happen so far for two reasons. The first reason is that I don't really enjoy spice in books, as I've already stated in this video. I think it tends to get thrown in too early and too intensely from the get-go, and I think it tends to undercut the romance. It makes it feel like we didn't work for anything. I want desperate pining for like almost the entire book before they even kiss for the first time. The second reason is because Jacob has been very clear about not wanting to use the fake dating ruse as an excuse to cross boundaries. He straight up says in the beginning that kissing is unnecessary, that they can make it work without forcing that kind of intimate contact. I respect the hell out of that. He's not interested in doing that stuff willy-nilly, and he's not interested in using the whole fake dating thing as an excuse to take advantage of Brianna. Brianna. Oh, and before I forget, during this night, Brianna briefly thinks about Nick and everything he didn't do, including not Googling things about parenthood. This comment did make me go, immediately. This night is also where they both individually realize that they're in love. It's just a warm, fuzzy night overall. And then we start getting the real horny musings from them. Because I liked them already, I tried very hard not to roll my eyes at how ridiculous and cringy some of Brianna's thoughts were. Brianna drives home afterwards to find that her mom has flown in and is already cooking up a storm. I haven't mentioned this yet, but Brianna's mom is a Salvadoran immigrant. I loved the representation there. Brianna's mom wants to meet Jacob and his family, and when Brianna calls Jacob, all she gets the chance to say is that her mom is in town before Jacob is independently asking if he can meet her. I love it. I love him. He is so genuinely sweet and sincere in getting to know everything that is important to Brianna. Brianna takes forever to get the message though. She remains confused about Jacob's motives for way too long. With Jacob's permission, Brianna tells her family that he's the kidney donor. She also tells them that she's moving in with Jacob immediately. Jacob's family have proven that they do show up unexpectedly all the time, so they have to live together for now if they don't want to be caught in their lie. To Jacob's dismay, Brianna does insist on sleeping on an air mattress though, so we do not get more bed sharing. They're happy though. This is a couple that genuinely really just has fun together, even when they're doing mundane everyday things. You can see how when they're actually together, they're gonna love just doing life together. The miscommunication ramps up soon though, because an old childhood friend of Brianna shows up. He's handsome, Brianna's delighted to see him, and they even exchange phone numbers to catch up. Jacob is worried about this because when Brianna introduces them, she introduces him as just a friend, and he thinks she wants to signal to Levi, the childhood friend, that she's single. What he doesn't know is that Levi's already in a relationship. Pretty much everyone but Brianna understands that Levi makes Jacob uncomfortable. Levi interacted with him for all of 5 minutes and clocked that he was jealous. This is something that annoys me in all genres, but feels especially prevalent in romance when someone is so willfully oblivious that it's past the point of belief. That night, their families meet. Brianna's mom is understandably grateful towards Jacob, but she takes it too far by telling Brianna she should make sure to, and I quote, give him all the good sex. I could forgive it for Jacob's mom, but I hate it here. I just find it so unrealistic and also so weird how involved the parents in these books are in their children's sex life. Is this a me problem? I'm really not understanding. Whatever, moving on. Brianna is texting Levi saying she wants to tell him the truth about the fake dating, and later she tells her mom she's planning to get drinks with him too. Her mom correctly assumes that Jacob would get jealous. I mean, she's going about this horrendously. I get that she thinks Jacob isn't genuinely into her, but she's really making sure that he never will be in her mind by making it seem like she's dating Levi or wants to date Levi. Jacob is going down a whole anxiety spiral about this. This manifests in several ways and really comes to a head the next day when Amy and Jeremiah's respective bachelor parties happen. The parties start in the same place with the intention of splitting afterwards. By the time they get to the house, Jacob is already starting to have a panic attack. He's so focused on Levi that he's not fully paying attention to the announcement Amy makes about being pregnant. Jacob, mid-panic attack, runs away to the basement and Brianna follows him. She assumes that the panic attack is about Amy's pregnancy. Brianna ends up hugging him tightly to comfort him and, for whatever reason, decides that straddling him makes total sense in this scenario. They end up having sex on the couch. I couldn't even appreciate that they were having their first kiss here because it escalated so quickly, and then I was way more focused on the fact that they didn't use protection. I was appalled. And I knew exactly where the epilogue would end up because of that. Brianna immediately regrets having sex with him. She's disgusted with herself for, in her mind, allowing herself to be vulnerable with someone who loves someone else just like her husband had. She says it was a mistake and runs away crying, refusing to talk to Jacob. Jacob leaves to give her some space, but does end up going home instead of to the bachelor party. Brianna, however, powers through the bachelorette party up until Amy's drunk friend makes a toast that's just bashing Jacob. Brianna is quick to defend Jacob and tear that girl to pieces, which I appreciate. She ends up retreating to the backyard to just angrily eat candy bars. Amy shows up and they have a minor heart-to-heart where Amy admits that she didn't treat Jacob well enough. And then even Amy realizes that Jacob is head over heels in love with Brianna and acts so differently to her. I really thought that this whole thing was going to be the main third act conflict, and once again, I was surprised by how quickly it was resolved. Brianna goes back to Jacob's house and she tells him that she's leaving back to her house. Jacob does not let her go without talking about what she's upset about, and when Brianna keeps making assumptions without letting him explain, Jacob makes sure to cut in and tell her that actually his panic attack was about Levi because he's really into Brianna and jealous. Who would have guessed? This was not Jacob's strongest moment though, because then he says that he doesn't care if Brianna is only using him for his kidney. He doesn't mind being used if it means she stays. And I really need him to not settle like that. That's horrible. Brianna confesses, however, and they kiss, and now they're all bubbly and happy and in love, and I was side-eyeing the fact that there was still 15% left in the book. We make it to Amy and Jeremiah's wedding day, day, Jacob and Brianna are having fun up until they're in the elevator to go back to their room. The elevator opens on a floor before theirs, and what are the odds? But Brianna's ex-husband and his affair partner are there. They're married, and the affair partner is pregnant. There's no confrontation here. The elevator doors just close, but Brianna shatters. She goes cold on Jacob, does a complete 180, and says that she's never going to live with him, never going to marry him, etc. And then we get a trauma reveal, let's say, where we find out some information I had already partially guessed. Brianna had suffered a miscarriage right after she'd found out about the cheating, and she had to suffer through it alone. Seeing the affair partner pregnant brought this back, along with the feeling that her ex-husband had never had an interest in a baby with her specifically. Brianna is convinced that every man is just like her ex-husband or like her dad. They'll all leave and hurt her on their way out. Brianna leaves to go back to her house, and we learn that a part of her freakout is because Brianna is pregnant again. She has a heart-to-heart with her mom, who I think does the respectable thing of taking accountability for how her actions may have impacted Brianna's view and approach to love. She encourages Brianna to give Jacob a chance. Instead, Brianna avoids him for days until she's ready to talk to him and tell Jacob that she's pregnant. Jacob is thrilled but heartbroken that Brianna still doesn't want to get back together. She's scared and feels like she's broken and doesn't know how to trust him. Jacob asks how he can fix this, and all she says is that she would need to be able to look into his soul. Jacob talks to his mom later, who explains to him that Brianna is having a very common trauma response and gives him some advice on how to hopefully make Brianna feel safe and loved. We also get a one-liner that reveals that Jacob's mom knew all along that they were fake dating. On the day of the kidney transplant, Brianna is still hurting really badly and depressed. She does make sure to see Jacob before he's wheeled into the OR though. Before they part, Jacob hands her his journal that he's been writing in throughout this whole book. So while he's in surgery, Brianna reads about their love story from his point of view. It almost made me want to cry. It was so sweet and romantic and yearning. There is some good, wholesome yearning in this book. In reading these journal entries, it's so clear to Brianna that Jacob is different from her ex-husband, that he wants her so deeply. At the end, Jacob has left a letter for her, but I wanted to specifically mention the line, "But someday, decades from now, when our grandchildren are grown and our hair is gray and we've spent a lifetime being harmless to each other, ... The rest of the sentence doesn't really matter. It's just, their whole thing about being harmless to each other is so soft. I love it so much. When Jacob wakes up from surgery, Brianna is there holding his hand. She says that she'd like to move back in with him, and he suggests getting a whole new place with both their names on it, or even just Brianna's. I think it's great that there was this reversal, even for just a moment, because so much of the book involves Brianna understanding and accommodating Jacob's mental health. It's important to see that Jacob isn't fragile or weak, that it's not always Brianna caring for him instead of vice versa. He also is willing and able to step up and accommodate and help her with her mental health issues as well. And now let's cut to the epilogue, which takes place 2 years later on their wedding day. They've had a daughter together named Ava. There's a list of things we learn from this epilogue. Jacob has chosen to take Brianna's name. They're doing couples counseling, and Brianna is also doing individual counseling. Brianna had a bout of postpartum depression. Jacob ended up being a stay-at-home dad and is loving it. Gibson still hasn't retired, so Brianna wasn't chief yet, but it's fine. And also, Ben was doing really well post-transplant and dating Jacob's sister. And thus we finished the recap. Wow, thanks for sticking through that if you did. And let's get on to the spoiler-free review. This was a solid 4 stars. Like, solid enough that I would be willing to buy my own copy maybe and reread it one day. I will say the beginning of the book was a real rocky start. I found Brianna so rude and annoying, and I didn't really like the writing style. I did come around to Brianna, but not so much to the writing. It was a lot of I did this, then I did that, la-di-da-di-da kind of thing. Too much of stating bluntly what we already knew and understood as the reader, and way too much dated language. Given another few years, and this book is going to feel cringy for how much it dated itself in the language and references it had. Those complaints aside, however, I think the anxiety representation was pretty accurate. It's in everything Jacob does, from looking up menus in advance, to asking specifically where he should park, to asking Brianna to give him a full itinerary / rundown of the day they're gonna have together. I've done so many of the things that Jacob is described as doing in this book. Some people may not like that, and they might not like how much it's mentioned in this book, especially if there's any kind of worry or concern about triggering their own anxiety from reading about it in somebody else. But I think the way they talk about anxiety in this book is generally pretty healthy. There's a big emphasis on all of the things Jacob is doing to help manage his anxiety. So we have mentions of medication, we have mentions of therapy, we have mentions of how conscious he is about the quantity of exercise and sleep he's getting and what kind of foods he's eating. His anxiety does seem to oddly drop off in the last section of the book. It's really up to you whether or not you think that that drop off was unrealistic or just him making a concerted effort to push himself out of his comfort zone, I didn't mind it very much, but I understand why some people would. Jacob as a character, I loved him. He was such a sweet and gentle and kind man. I mean, this guy is willing to do pretty much anything to please Brianna to a silly degree. He's like the type of guy who would, I don't know, buy her a vacation house on the coast just because Brianna mentioned that she likes the beach. I have no idea if he has the kinds of funds to do that kind of thing, but if he did, he would do that. And that kind of mentality, let's say, added some sweet humor to the book. I wish I could give you actual examples of it coming up throughout the story, but I just want to let you experience those things for yourself. I thought they were really cute and I thought they were kind of funny. I liked Brianna less as a character, but I have to admit, it's just because she gave me such a bad first impression in the beginning of the book. She turned out to be a fantastic person though, and by the end of it, there was no question in my mind that she was, a perfect match for Jacob. They both put in effort to learn what the other person needed for their own mental health and traumas, and at no point did they ever make any of the accommodations that they would give each other seem like an inconvenience or a burden. It was always just a foregone conclusion that it was the kind of thing that you did for the people you love. Beyond the anxiety rep, I think Abby Jimenez did an admirable job of discussing serious topics such as depression and miscarriage. I can't really speak on the accuracy of everything, but it seemed realistic to me, and Abby Jimenez did seem to handle it with a lot of care. I loved the romance between Jacob and Brianna. While the miscommunication did get really frustrating at times, I respected that they were actually fairly decent at communication, especially when compared to other romance couples that I've heard about / read about. There were a lot of things that I expected to get dragged out for much longer as miscommunication problems that ended up getting resolved pretty quickly because they were pretty decent at being adults and actually talking things out. The yearning was very good as well. Not the best yearning I've ever seen in my life. Like, it didn't make me feel pain in every bone in my body, but it was good enough yearning that it felt like their love was earned. There is spice in the book for whoever's interested in that. It bothered me less than I think it usually does in romance novels because, again, the yearning was there. I feel like spice too much too early tends to cut the tension build up, but that's not what happened here. The spice portion of the book, though, is like the least compelling part of it, though. Jacob and Brianna were very romantic and sweet, and it just warmed my heart how much they genuinely seem to like each other and like spending time together. I've got a few quotes that I've pulled out from the book. Nothing that I think gives spoilers at all, so I'll just share them here. I'm sorry someone made you feel like it's hard to love you. I was always starved when it came to her. I lived off crumbs, never getting full. I wanted to spend the rest of my life just being with him, adoring him, protecting him, living in all his quiets. I was supposed to read The Honeymooners in this video, but I will not be doing that. My hold at the library still hasn't come in, and frankly, I think I'm a little burnt out on romance novels at the moment. There's also the fact that I think this video is going to be long enough with just the 3 books that I've already talked about. I've never done vlogs in this style before, so I had not anticipated, 1, how long it would take, or how much effort it would take to recap these books in their entirety. I hope you enjoyed it though. I love watching reading vlogs, but my hang up regarding them has always been that the updates feel really disjointed if you don't have the full context of the story behind them. And there have been plenty of reading vlogs that I've watched where I want that context. I don't want to read the book myself, or I did read the book, but it's long enough ago that I don't really remember everything about it. But I still want the full context in this video so that I can go through the whole journey and remember everything with the YouTuber talking about it. I also much prefer filming sit-down style videos, so whipping out my camera just randomly throughout a reading process it doesn't vibe well with me. And then I found Frankie's shelf on YouTube, and I was obsessed with watching his videos. The way he does reading vlogs is exactly what I was missing, so full credit goes to him for this style of reading vlog, although the books that he reads for his vlogs are much stranger and more unique than this. But enough of that yapping though, let's rank the books that I read in this video and then give you my final thoughts on the experience. At the bottom of the 3 books is A Funny Story by Emily Henry. It felt too repetitive and too much like empty fluff. I probably won't read any more Emily Henry books unless I really literally have nothing else to read and it's available on my Libby app. In second place is Check and Mate, which I genuinely thought was going to be first place. It tugged at the heartstrings for me, and the Chessmaster premise made it more interesting than mundane every day. way. Plus, our main characters being young adults did make it easier for me to forgive many of the things that would normally annoy me in a romance novel. That being said, I'm like on the fence about whether or not I would read another book from Ali Hazelwood. I have heard that Check and Mate is the most different out of her stories and that all of the rest of her books have male love interests that are just very, very similar. I don't really know if I'd enjoy reading another book. I'm open to it if a premise really interests me, but at the moment I don't think any of them really do. And then my favorite book out of this video was yours truly. I loved the letters. I thought there was a decent amount of yearning and delayed gratification. The characters were sometimes annoying in their miscommunication, but it actually felt like a reasonable amount for adults. I would read from Abby Jimenez again if the premise interested me, and I say that more sincerely than I did for Ali Hazelwood. Now, what did I learn from this experience? I think contemporary romance in general just isn't my thing. Everyday people doing everyday things, experiencing everyday emotions just tends to be boring for me. Check and Mate was more interesting to me because, you know, internationally renowned chess players, that's not an everyday profession. Of some of my favorite romances, a couple of them were fantasy sci-fi based, others involved unique occupations or lifestyles, and of course others were LGBT romances, which I love on a personal level and also because we are inundated with heterosexual romance all the time anyway, so it does feel standout. So while I would be interested in doing a part 2 to this video covering some of the other popular romance authors like Talia Hibbert and Kennedy Ryan, I think in my personal time I'm better off looking into books like, what's it called? The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, or I don't know, like a historical romance or something that isn't contemporary every day. I feel like these conclusions I've made should have been obvious to me from the beginning, but I don't think they were because I hadn't read enough romance books for me to really form coherent opinions and have given everything a shot enough for me to definitively say, I like this, I don't like this. So slowly but surely, I am honing in on my taste. If you have any suggestions for romances that you think I would like based on how I felt about these books and my conclusions that I've drawn, please leave them in the comments. I am open to any and every suggestion. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Let me see. Can I reach the camera from here without disturbing the cat? Say hello, cat. Cat, come say hello. Cat. Cat. My little baby. Say bye, Elliot.